Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is Arnel Tanyag with Tanyag Company. We're doing today something unique. I call this the actual new member highlight for CVBIA, which is basically Coastal Virginia Building Industry Association. I'm the membership chair, and one of the things that we do is we like to highlight new members that have unique services for the community. As part of the chair of the membership committee, I meet a lot of members, especially new members and existing members, and just want to basically do our best to promote them, especially if they have a unique service, a unique story that can be beneficial to the community and to the organization. So today I want to introduce a good friend of mine who recently joined, Marshall Vernon. Tell us a little bit about you and the business you are, but tell us the name of the company and what does it do?
All right. So first of all, thanks for having me, Arnel. I really appreciate that. I represent Always Access. I'm the founder and owner. And what we focus on is what we call mobility solutions, specifically access in and out of the home using aluminum ramps, either modular, threshold, or suitcase ramps, preventing falls and working specifically for seniors that are trying to what we call age in place. Meaning, live out their golden years in the house that they've spent their entire life building, and living in. So trying to maintain that and prevent as many falls as we can in the Tidewater area.
So, how did you get started in your business?
So I have about 15 years, a little over that, of project and program management through mainly residential nonprofit building. However, starting back in about 2017, I took over the home repair program in DC and started working specifically as an aging in place installer of grab bars, handrails, and things like that. COVID threw me through a little bit of a loop as far as what I wanted to do next. So I came down to the Tidewater area. I'm originally from the Eastern Shore. So it's a bit of a homecoming. And I started working with the Habitat for Humanity here, built a great relationship with a ramp manufacturer that's in the U.S., located out in Kentucky. And we just were getting a lot of calls for people that weren't necessarily low income, but were in need of a solid company that can just say what they're going to do at a reasonable price and provide the services that they promise they're going to make,
So, what are some reasons you like your business?
I like specifically the modular ramps as on a personal level. It's a giant Lego set or erector set, if you will. So there's that aspect of putting it together. It's a lot of fun. Obviously, I love building, working with my hands and everything. But something about the ramps going together is kind of cool. I get to do the layout, the design. When we're putting in a ramp, we look for what they call a 112 pitch. So for every inch you go up, you want about a foot of distance. So if it's a 30-inch rise to get inside the house, that's a 30-foot ramp.
Oh, wow.
So making those layouts and trying to make them kind of work with already what the front of the house is looking like, trying to keep them on the walkway if we can, and make sure that they work for the lifestyle and match, as best you can, the aesthetic to the home, so it doesn't just seem like it was just dropped there. Yeah.
So, if you could describe who are some of your best type of clients you like to work with, what first the clients, and we can talk about the situations where people should get a ramp versus they don't know what they don't know and they wait too long.
Right. So I guess the easiest way to answer that is ramps are best when they're preventative. So with that in mind, occupational therapists, physical therapists, people that are identifying mobility issues in the home are my prime candidate as far as working with them. And they'll identify a problem as being an issue that could come up. It's something as small as a couple of steps doesn't seem like much to, a 30 or 40-year-old, but to somebody, it's in their 70s or 80s, it could be a massive threshold, and especially if there's not a handrail or anything. So, but when we talk about ramps, like I said, preventative. So the way I explain it is you have the cost of the ramp and you debate whether or not you want to buy the ramp, which I understand. It's a financial decision just like anything else. But if the ramp, which will highly likely prevent a fall, that fall on average is going to cost you about $30,000 in medical debt or medical costs, and you're still going to need the ramp because the person's in recovery from the fall. So by buying the ramp on the front end, you're preventing the hospital stay, you're preventing the recovery time, And I mean, after a fall, the unfortunately the rate of mortality, especially for men, go up extremely high. I mean, within the first 5 years, it's like a 70 or 80% mortality rate for if they break a hit over the age of 65.
How much does it, on average, how much does it cost for a ramp?
So it's kind of hard to say because different lengths, but I'd say on average, between $5,000 and $10,000 would be complete, it installed, ready to set up. Shorter ramps would obviously be less than that. We also offer threshold ramps,
Hmm.
which are, only a couple, $100, but that's more for somebody that's actually restricted specifically to a wheelchair. Even something like a couple of inches, 2 or 3 inches. If it's a house built on a slab, they'll do that to get to the front door,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
a
yeah,
bunch
yeah. I
of
know
different
that.
scenarios. That is extremely difficult on person driving a wheelchair. It's difficult on the wheelchair. It's really not great for the threshold of the
Wow.
door. So by putting a ramp in there to prevent them constantly hitting that, we
Yeah.
can ensure longevity on the door and make sure. So the prices range, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be cheaper than the recovery and everything else that's attached to it.
Oh no, no. I always, the reason I ask that question is because you know people can afford what they can afford if they really see
Right.
the value. So the idea is that sometimes people have to say no to something to get something they really know they want. And what you're talking about, like with ramps, is that it's I think ramps are a bridge to keep the person very active, because when they don't have a ramp, they're not gonna leave the house because they're afraid if they walk down the stairs. Like, so my question is that a lot of people I see on I drive, I see a lot of wooden ramps, and so that's that people go through the wooden where I think they should do aluminum. What are the pros and cons when you do a wooden ramp? Because I mean, some of them look really nice, but man, some of them look like all jacked up after a while. I mean, it's crazy.
Yes. So wooden ramps, it was if we were having this conversation 15 or 20 years ago, wooden ramps would be the no-brainer because lumber was so cheap. But lumber
Yeah,
continuously gets more and more expensive. So the
yeah,
the first argument that people always make is material. At this point, it's really not that much more to go with aluminum,
yeah.
as opposed to because you're not just talking about the wooden ramp, you're also talking about the permitting, the zoning processing, all that
Oh
needs to
yeah.
be inspected as if you're building a deck. Anytime you puncture the
Oh,
ground like that, you got to call 811. It's going to be a multi-day process to set that up. You got to set the posts in the ground, let them harden, then you frame it
that's a
out,
good
deck it.
point. That's a good point.
Then you get into the yearly or every 2 year maintenance of sanding it and staining it and replacing the parts when those come up. The screws start to back out, things like that.
Oh yeah.
There's and then so the other scary thing is we've gotten to a place where some municipalities, because they don't want to deal with the American Disability Act regulations, saying you really, I mean, more or less, the
Yeah.
it's just you can't stop somebody from accessing their home. So the cities have gotten away from zoning and doing permits in some cases, but then what happens is you got people building decks that are not up to code. Either they're too steep, the wrong material. Sometimes you'll see guys use plywood
Yeah.
instead of, and that's just a slip hazard after the first rain. So the ramps, the wooden ramps, just really are not. They're just more of a pain than anything, unless you're really going to be maintaining it constantly and you really want to put the money up front. But at that point, you might as well just do, aluminum ramp, or I mean, at that point, concrete. Why not just put a concrete ramp out there? But
Yeah, that's
of
what you're
course,
saying.
the big thing with the aluminum ramps that's different about wooden ramps and concrete ramps and anything else like that is I can remove them. They install within 3 or 4 hours, and
Wow.
they can be removed in half that time.
Really?
And then and the most you're going to see from an aluminum ramp on the property, besides maybe some dead spots in the grass where the feet sat, was two screw holes at the top of the ramp and at the bottom of the ramp, about a quarter inch. That's it.
Wow.
Once I pull it up, you fill it with a little bit of hydraulic cement. Nobody will ever know it was there. Whereas a wooden ramp, you're having to rip the whole thing out. You got to redo all the landscaping around it because you tore up the ground. I mean, in a situation where you're trying to get, unfortunately, we run into a situation where somebody needs a ramp on their home. There's a timeline where eventually they're no longer going to be able to live in the home because of one
Yeah.
reason or another. So you have to think about how quick, in a lot of cases, it's the next generation that's worried about selling that house. And you have to think about, how quickly do we want to turn this house around, get it back on the market so that we can, you don't want to have to sit on that house, worry about all these renovations. And aluminum ramp answers all those questions quickly.
Yeah, that is true. And I was thinking about this. So some of your top clients are probably the kids who have to take care of their elderly parents, like eventually when some people couples become empty nesters, when they get to probably like 60, 70, 80, that's a problem because especially like my parents live in Salem Woods, so they got steps. After a while,
Right.
steps are not good. So I think it's the kids who really have to deal with look at that earlier. And then I also agree with it. It's like the home health care physical therapists, home health care agencies, home health care occupational therapists, especially physical therapists, because they're in people's houses all the time and they know they can't move. Or even people who own residential homes, because like my mother-in-law lives in a residential home, but then she has a temporary ramp, right? And I'm like, they're not going to pull out that temporary
Yeah.
ramp to take her out, because my wife would like to take her out in a wheelchair
Right.
and out and walk around there, but they're not going to pull out that temporary ramp all the time to do that, so
Right.
she doesn't go out.
And the problem is, I mean, there's some of those temporary ramps can get kind of heavy, but yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is anybody should consider mobility. I mean, even if it's not your home, but like you said, your parents come over pretty often and they're visiting you.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that they feel like they can enter and exit the home. You mentioned it earlier, but what it's called is called fear of falling.
Mm.
So if somebody has a fall or has a near miss or even sees a peer who's going through the recovery actually saw the peer have the fall, they start to develop what we call fear of falling, which is
Mm.
a cognitive. You start to limit yourself. You're not going to put yourself in risky situations. These people tend not to bathe as much because getting in and out of the shower seems risky to them.
Yeah.
Long periods of time standing, so like cleaning or cooking, go by
Yeah.
the wayside. They don't go in and out of the home, especially if there's a threshold or some steps like that. And
Wow.
then what happens is they're trying to prevent a fall, but what they're making is they're increasing the chances because you see muscle weakness, you see cognitive ability start to fall off, a lack of motor skills, the hygiene starts to fall off. So really what happens is the fear of falling creates a much larger problem. And like I said, sometimes they didn't even have to have the fall, just the close call. And I mean, I'm in my
Yeah.
30s. I've gotten out of the shower and almost gone down and scared the living heck out of me. So I can only imagine somebody who's, more unsteady in their mobility as they get older is going to have that same fear.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is what do you think of the problems you solve for people like who get a ramp? What did it solve for them that they don't realize they could have, but not just having. They need to have an aluminum ramp, not just a ramp. That's what I'm
Right.
hearing.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, the initial tactical is just the preventing of the fall.
Okay.
So, like I said, the recovery time is brutal. If they can even recover, it can really limit somebody after a significant fall as far as, how they're able to get around their home or whether or not they have to move into assisted living. I think it's like 40% of seniors that enter assisted living do so after a fall. So it's a pretty high statistic of like what makes
So
them make that decision.
so what I'm hearing is the ramp really gives them the safety and security to still live an ideal lifestyle, because once they fall, they become fearful, and then it limits them, isolates them, which again increases the fall. But then it also puts pressure on the kids who like they'd love to take them out, but then they can't take them out because the house is not set up for them to take them out. So they kind of contribute to the isolation because they don't have that
Right.
ramp there. So a ramp, I think what people see ramps are is not preventive, it's actual I got to get it now, when it should be when somebody's older and they're having mobility challenges to have them fall. They should put a ramp there that will give people confidence, probably increase their ability to go out and enjoy life. Because once I used to be a nurse, and once elderly gets scared, it's very hard to get them to do anything else because they don't trust themselves, and if the environment isn't set up for them to trust the process of having a ramp, having the ability to move in and out, typically what will happen is they will isolate, they'll fight you, they'll get very distant and negative because they're scared.
Right. That's a great the I don't remember for the CDC, but I mean, we have at this point we consider loneliness a national epidemic as far as
Mm.
senior population. So, the loneliness sets in. I mean, dementia is directly linked to this too.
Yeah.
So if they're not getting out of the house and they're staying in and watching daytime television, if that, like, that's going to start to deteriorate and lead to bigger problems. But a great example is there's a guy who lived over in Ocean View,
Mm-hmm.
and he was completely in a motorized wheelchair, paralyzed,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, was down. But it was exactly what we're talking about, 3-inch threshold. So to get in and out of the house, he needed his neighbor's help, which was fine if he
Yeah.
could coordinate, but if he needed to go to a doctor's office, the guy would come over and help him. But once we put in a threshold ramp just to get him over that 3 inches, now he can leave the house if it's a nice day. Now, if he
Wow.
just spur of the moment he wants to go around the block, he can just leave the house. And
Wow.
it's amazing if you really put yourself in the parameters of like what that would be like to stare out the window and know you can't go outside without
Yeah.
somebody helping you, and you didn't know it was going to be that nice of a day or whatever. That's extremely limiting. So we're trying to give them literally access to the outside world.
Yeah. So you're saying that some people have to have wheelchairs, so having a ramp actually makes it easy for them to get in and out, especially with their family. Because I know my father was staying at my sister's house. They don't, they had to go through the garage. So he had to reverse that wheelchair. I was
Yep.
like, this is stupidly crazy. This
Yeah.
is freaking, and
And that
then and then I think they didn't use the front door because they had like maybe an inch threshold or three, and like, oh, this is just crazy.
Well, you asked me what I run into a lot. I run into a lot of two things. The senior saying, "Oh, you don't, I can get out when I need to. They help me. It's not that big of a thing." They don't want to be the burden. They're already feeling burdensome in their
Yeah,
situation. They don't want somebody else to waste their time on
yeah,
that when they don't really need it from their perspective.
yeah,
But also,
yeah,
there's the caregiver, the child that is
yeah.
wheeling their loved one up, and God forbid they lose grip or something. How are you going to deal with that guilt? Like that would
Oh
just
yeah, yeah.
so there's a mental health aspect to, I mean, all of aging, really. There's a mental health aspect that we're really just now accepting and really using as a
No,
tool
no,
in
no.
all.
That yeah, that is true. And so and you're what's your territory? Is it all Hampton Roads?
Yeah, so we do everything from the Maryland line, so Accomack, Northampton County, all of Tidewater, and over to Newport News and Williamsburg. We'll do a free estimate where I come out. I'll do the
Yeah.
layout. I'll explain to you why I'm choosing the layout. I have little soccer cones so you can see exactly what it's going to
Mm-hmm.
look like, and then I will produce a digital layout which
Mm.
the person can look at and see exactly how it measures and almost like a blueprint.
That's pretty cool. So you almost give them like a visual blueprint, and I would assume you probably already had financing, like some type of financing if people need to do it.
So we don't have a financer set up as of yet. Right now, we just started as a little while ago. We are working on financing. We're also trying to get into leasing. There's
Yeah.
a big need for leasing. So with our initial sales,
Yeah.
we're going to do a buy. We're working on a buyback program where basically, if the ramp is no longer needed after 2 or 3 years, we'll buy it back at
That's
at
pretty
a
good.
percentage of its value, and then then we're going to look into more doing leasing. But we are working on getting financing set up because we understand it is a big financial commitment on the front end. And the
Yeah.
frustration that we have is that Medicare will pay for a wheelchair or a motorized or anything, but they will not pay for a ramp. That is not included. The VA will, and we're working on getting VA licensing. But as far as Medicare, they don't consider the ramp
Yeah, that's a
benefits.
shame that they do that. They probably need to write that in legislation. That's crazy they
Yeah,
don't do
so
that.
that's a little bit. That's just me venting.
No, it's all right. When they should do because that's going to be mobile. You're totally correct. If you understand from a nursing standpoint, once a senior gets falls and they get fearful, it goes downhill. If you can prevent that's less burden on the economics of hospitalization and insurance. And then the other thing too, talk. You said the VA will pay for it, right? If it's a veteran.
Yeah, so the VA has a ramp deployment program. It's a little behind.
Mm-hmm.
From what I've understood, it's about a 6 month waiting period. And they basically give you, there's not much of an option in it from what I understand. They basically supply the ramp. You don't get to really pick your contractor or anything like that. So we have had people that didn't want to go that route because they didn't trust what was going to come out. However,
Oh,
there is that benefit, and for low income families, there's local resources too, like senior services, and of course Habitat for Humanity. If you know, but as far as the VA goes, yeah, they do have a program, and I think it is free to a vet. I don't know what the limitations are. I don't think there's an income limitation. However, and I don't think your disability has to be related to your service.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not sure about home ownership. I'd have to look into that.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. So tell us the reason why you joined the CVBA.
So there's a couple answers. My background is residential building. So just being in the Norfolk area as of 2020, I keep, for lack of a better term, bumping into CVBIA.
Mm-hmm.
Members like Vince Napolitano and Chris Morin, and those guys have been great as far as including me in the conversation and the networking ability. But when I wanted to specifically get into the aging, the National Association of Home Builders, who is the parent company or
Mm-hmm.
national organization to
Yep.
this Coastal Virginia Builders Association, they have a lot of training courses. Not just in aging in place, they do provide the certified aging in place specialist training, which I had done. They have a bunch of other, weatherization, and with all of those, a membership at your local builders association will actually get you a pretty significant discount.
Wow.
Much more than like 10%. I think basically, not to get too much in the weeds, but to pay for my training, the money I saved in my first training by being a member paid for the membership at an associate's level.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
Or I think if it didn't, it was dang near close. So, and then of course, and not to get too much into it, but I lived in DC for a little while, and our membership also gets us free access to the National Association of Home Builders
Mm-hmm.
museum in DC, which is great. I don't know if
Oh
you've ever
wow.
actually been. It's a cool building. It's the old VA building back from like after
Oh
the
yeah.
Civil War, and they have great exhibits. I saw one on like the secret cities they built up around the nuclear facilities and everything. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm nerding out. But yeah, basically the Coastal Virginia Builders Association had a great local presence, but also the connection on the state level and especially on the national
National
level
level.
made
Yeah.
the whole thing financially work out as well.
Yeah. Tell us I think you are getting more involved, and you got an initiative you probably want to run besides growing your business. What do you think that is? That initiative you want to share?
Yeah, so we're in the process. Are you talking about the what
Yeah.
Logan
Yeah.
and I have been working
Yeah.
with? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So Logan Vargas and I, and I got to give him the credit. He's done a lot of the footwork. Are trying to launch basically a junior board for the Builders Association, and then what that allows us to do is to set up a young professionals network. The other day we had a social at Cova Brewing, and Colby made a great point about how we do scholarships and everything for people trying to encourage them to get into the trades. And then we have the Builders Association for guys that have gotten their license and are trying to network. But what we don't have is after you get in the trade, before you get to a management position, how do we keep you?
Yeah.
How do we keep you in and how do we keep you interested? It's a great incentive because if we can get the young professionals and a junior board set up, because you have
Mm-hmm.
the big name builders all have young guys on their staff. It's a great way to say, hey, you're doing a great job. We're going to highlight you. We want you to be brought onto this. So it's an asset in that sense, the young professionals. And then eventually we're going to, the goal is to get to a point where we can do trainings, maybe pipeline for licensing, builders licensing, community outreach, volunteer days every, 6
Yeah.
months or so with Habitat or something. But yeah, that's what we're working on right now. So it's been exciting.
Exciting. So if somebody has, so let me ask this question: if they have a parent, elderly parent, who is already having struggle with mobility, and they want, and then that should be a situation. Should they talk to you about looking at a ramp earlier than later? If you are a occupational therapist, especially ones that does home care, or physical therapist that does home visits or at home care and do physical therapists, they should come talk to you because there's always going to be mobility issues. If
Yeah.
there are like people who are renting out, medical equipment like wheelchairs, motorized scooters, they should look at come and talk to you. You have ramps because it sounds like you're advocating get the ramp before the fall happens and versus trying to get the ramp after the fall happens. You know what I mean?
I
Get
mean,
it
yeah,
prior.
ideally that would be the way to do it. And like you said, it's just a benefit across the board financially and everything. But yeah, I mean, any of those people. But right now, we're working. It's a new company. We're working on the estimating and everything. So we're more than game to look at a job. Like I said, it's a free estimate. I want to get out in the community. I
Yeah.
want to talk to people, advocate for the use of ramps. Hopefully, the aluminum ramp is the one that they feel most comfortable with. I think it's the best option. But at the very least, we want to come back to a place where, I think I told you this. In the next 10 years, 1 in 9 Americans is going to be over the age of 80. So
Yeah.
we can't ignore what's going on. We gotta, there's not enough hospital beds for everybody to have a fall. So either we get smart about it, or we're gonna have a much bigger problem.
Yeah, and I like aluminum ramps because it's aluminum is sturdy.
Yeah.
Wood after the first couple months, depending on the weather, is not sturdy at all.
Yeah, easily, and they're easily adjusted. We've had some issues after a really heavy rainfall. It got a little, and I mean, within 15 minutes, I go out there, tighten a couple screws, undo a couple things, and get it back, and it's right back as if it were just installed.
Yeah, wooden ramps, that's not going to be like
No,
that.
you're going to have to add wood, replace stuff. It's a pain. I mean, if you got a neighbor that really loves to do woodworking, good on you. But most people don't have that. So
Yeah,
yeah, the
no, no,
aluminum
no.
just makes much more sense. And it has a ridge base on it. So even when we do get the occasional snow, it's going to be much safer than the wood. It really is a better product.
Well, if people are looking to talk to you about aluminum ramps before a fall or after a fall, physical therapists, occupational therapists, kids with elderly parents, how should they contact you? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
So, like I said, the company's name is Always Access. So,
Always access.
alwaysaccess.com, ALLWAYS, access.com, has a contact sheet on there, more information about what you and I talked about today as far as like aging in place and how to do fall prevention and things like that. And yeah, anybody has a question can follow up with me there. That's probably the most direct way.
What's the best number to reach you if they have to call you directly?
Sure. 757-276-1056
All right.
is going to be, and that goes directly to me. So if you call that number, you're going to hear this voice.
Let's say it one more time.
757-276-1056.
All right, that's awesome. So again, I want to thank you for the audience for watching this and just listen to Marshall about his company because look, he's totally right. It's a boomer generation. They're getting older. Like my father's like, I think he's 80 and he's got some health issues. So I mean, better to get the ramp early so they can enjoy life versus by the time you get the ramp, they may already not take advantage of it just because the fact of they're scared. But even if they did get it later, it's better to have something because then you can take them out. Because I mean, I do understand about environment. Environment's not built for people to be mobile; they just won't be mobile, and it's for the kids that it's more important for the kids because we had to put my mother-in-law in a group home, and my father is older, and so we want to keep them mobile because they're more mobile and they're going out. They're going to live a lot longer. If they're stuck in the house, it's not going to help. And then if we don't have the environment built like a ramp, it's not going to make it easier. It's going to make it difficult, and it makes it harder and harder if the environment isn't simple for them to really operate at the best because we don't know. That's why I wanted to highlight, Marshall as a new member of CVBIA because I mean ramps are going to be a standard. I prefer aluminum wood, and he's the expert at it. So I really appreciate him getting on the video. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me or him. And I think it's a great video just to highlight some of our new members in the association and really highlight what they do and how they help people and give them some social proof and people that can reach out to them because one thing about CBBA, we do bring in great members who have great value to the local residential construction industry and the people who are part of that, and especially in the elderly population and the boomers, because a lot of us are getting older, and so we want to know. And then a lot of us have parents that we have to take care of, and I always believe better have some great resources to talk. And Marshall's one of those guys who'll come out there, explain everything, and give you the pros and cons, and let you make the decision. So, Marshall, give us one more thing before we wrap up, and then we'll wrap up.
Hey man, I just want to take my time to say thank you. The Builders Association has been fantastic, and you specifically, Arnel, have been a wealth of knowledge and getting me out there. So I really appreciate you. I love this system, and yeah, check back with us in a couple of months, and we'll talk more about the junior board maybe.
All right, it's awesome. I love that. All right, thanks guys. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.